Now, an enemy that intends to destroy our homeland and change our religion has come, crossing our God-given frontiers. But with the help of God, I will not allow him to have my country. You, my countrymen, I have never knowingly hurt you, nor have you hurt me. Help me, those of you with zeal and willpower, and those who do not have the zeal, for the sake of your wives and your religion, help me with your prayers. In 1896, a European empire invaded Ethiopia, expecting another colonial conquest. They had modern artillery. They had military academies. They had one of the most advanced armies in the world. Across the mountains stood an African empire that was supposed to become their next colony. Instead, what happened at Adwa became one of the most shocking military defeats of the colonial era. Thousands of Italian soldiers would be killed or captured. An entire invasion would collapse, and the myth that Africa could only be conquered would suffer a devastating blow. This is the story of the Battle of Adwa. To truly understand this triumph, we have to expose the calculated deception that started it all. It began in 1889 with the Treaty of Huchele, brokered by Italian envoy Count Pietro Antonelli. On the surface, it was presented as a peaceful framework for trade and friendship. But hidden inside Article 17 was a toxic diplomatic trap. In the Amharic version, signed by Emperor Menelik II, the text stated that Ethiopia could choose to use Italy's diplomatic channels for foreign affairs. It was completely optional, a matter of convenience. But in the Italian version, sent back to Europe, the verb was deliberately altered to say Ethiopia must conduct all foreign relations through Rome. With that single, deceptive word change, Italy falsely declared to the world that Ethiopia was now a subjugated Italian protectorate. For years, Menelik was kept completely in the dark. He only discovered the fraud when he wrote official letters to Queen Victoria of Great Britain and Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany, only to be told that European powers could not reply to him directly, because Italy allegedly owned his empire. The insult cut deep. Rome expected the African monarch to bow to the reality of European dominance. Instead, Menelik fiercely rejected the claim and formally denounced the entire treaty in 1893. Beside him stood Empress Tetu Batul, who recognized the trap instantly. She bluntly told the Italian diplomats, "You want Ethiopia to be represented before the other powers as your protectorate. But this shall never be. I am a woman. I do not like war, but I would rather die than accept your treaty." Infuriated by the defiance of an African state, the Italian government ordered an invasion, confident that European military superiority would quickly force the empire to its knees. The Prime Minister of Italy, Francesco Crispi, and his colonial governor, General Oreste Baratieri, made a fatal miscalculation. They believed Ethiopia was nothing more than a fractured collection of semi-independent kingdoms. They assumed that by stoking internal rivalries and offering bribes, they could easily turn regional lords against the emperor. Instead, the existential threat of colonization triggered something miraculous. Menelik issued a passionate national mobilization decree calling upon every citizen to defend their ancestral homeland. His words rang out across the empire. Now, an enemy that intends to destroy our homeland and change our religion has come, crossing our God-given frontiers. Now, with the help of God, I will not allow him to have my country. You, my countrymen, I have never knowingly hurt you, nor have you hurt me. help me, those of you with zeal and willpower, and those who do not have the zeal. For the sake of your wives and your religion, help me with your prayers." The response shattered European expectations. Regional rivals, lords who had spent years bickering over borders, put aside their differences and marched under a single banner. Ras Makonnen brought 15,000 highly trained riflemen from Harar. Ras Mikhail mobilized 6,000 fierce cavalrymen from Wollo. Ras Mengesha brought the battle-hardened warriors of Tigray. Farmers, noblemen, Christians, and Muslims dropped their tools, picked up their weapons, and walked barefoot for hundreds of miles through punishing mountain terrain. When the diverse forces converged, Menelik had assembled an astronomical force, over 100,000 warriors, with nearly 80,000 armed with modern rifles, purchased from Europe itself. By February 1896, General Baratieri's invading army of roughly 17,000 heavily armed men was dug into deep defensive positions at Saria. Baratieri knew he was heavily outnumbered. He wanted to wait, hoping the massive Ethiopian army would run out of food and dissolve into the landscape. But back in Rome, politicians and newspapers were screaming for blood. Prime Minister Crispi sent insulting telegrams to Baratieri, mocking his caution and demanding a decisive victory against an army they viewed as inferior. Bowing to intense political pressure from home, Baratieri called a council of war on the night of February 29th. Under intense pressure from his aggressive brigade commanders, he reluctantly ordered a blind nighttime advance into the rugged passes of Adwa. The Italian plan looked clean on paper, but it collapsed instantly in the harsh African terrain. Baratieri split his 17,000 troops into 3 separate columns, led by Generals Albertone, Arimondi, and Dabormida, intending to seize the high ground before the Ethiopians woke up. But the terrain was unforgiving, and the Italian maps were wildly inaccurate. In the pitch-black darkness of the mountains, the columns lost contact with one another. General Albertone's vanguard column marched too far ahead, completely isolating themselves, while the other 2 columns got hopelessly jammed in narrow, jagged ravines. When the sun rose on March 1st, 1896, Ethiopian scouts spotted the fatal error. Alerted to the movement, Menelik didn't hesitate. He unleashed the full fury of his united front. The Ethiopian forces struck with the power of an avalanche. Albertone's isolated brigade was suddenly surrounded by tens of thousands of charging warriors. Empress Tetu herself directed artillery positions from the rear, while her personal guard held critical water supplies, ensuring the Ethiopian fighters remained fueled, while the Italians baked in the heat. For hours, the valleys echoed with the deafening roar of artillery and the terrifying blasts of traditional war horns. The Ethiopians closed the distance, turning the battle into a brutal hand-to-hand melee, where European bayonets were no match for the raw courage and sheer numbers of the defenders. By noon, Albertone's column was completely crushed. When General Dabormida's column tried to march to their rescue, they were ruthlessly cut off and outflanked by Ethiopian cavalry. The Italian lines broke into a panicked, chaotic rout. Soldiers threw down their rifles and fled for their lives through the rocky cliffs, pursued by an enemy defending their very right to exist. By the time the smoke cleared that afternoon, the Italian army had suffered a catastrophic 70% casualty rate. Over 6,000 Italian soldiers lay dead. Thousands more were captured, and millions of dollars worth of modern European military equipment was left behind in the dirt. General Baratieri's colonial ambitions were utterly destroyed. The triumph at Adwa was not just a victory on a battlefield. It was a profound vindication of African dignity by forcing a global superpower to sign a new treaty recognizing its terms. Ethiopia proved to the world that sovereignty, tactical genius, and military brilliance were not exclusive to any one continent. The victory at Adwa became a masterclass in resistance, sending a shockwave of hope across the globe. For centuries, a false narrative had been pushed that African nations were destined to be conquered. Adwa shattered that lie forever. The battle became a living testament that when a people stand completely unified, no force on earth can break them. The green, yellow, and red colors of the Ethiopian flag became symbols of pure resistance. Decades later, as other African nations rose up to claim their own freedom, they adopted those very same colors for their own flags, drawing strength from the knowledge that their ancestors had already paved the way. Adwa stands as an eternal reminder of what is possible when we refuse to let others define our destiny. It is a story of unmatched courage, brilliant leadership, and an unyielding refusal to bow down. Never forget who you are, and never forget the legacy of those who stood before you. True sovereignty isn't a gift given by others. It is a right defended by ourselves. Follow and subscribe for more revealing and exciting stories about the battles Africa fought.